How are you?
I am doing well, Hunter. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been excited about this session, so thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I love excitement. So before we jump into questions, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the listeners, how on your career journey of now you're in this consulting and coaching practice and you're sharing knowledge with others. So I've been asking this question a few times this week. Did you have some experiences that maybe brought you to where you are that you wanted to impart with some other people, perhaps?
Absolutely. So early on, just even throughout high school, when I look at my personality style, I've just always been observant and I've always had a love for people, right? That's always been an easy thing for me to connect with people. So going to college, not too sure what it was going to be, whether it was going to be ministry or psychology. And I figured, well, if you're going to be about people, I mean, you might as well study human behavior as well. So that was pretty much how I merged it together. And from that point on, ever since I graduated from Southeastern University, I've worked in rehabs. I've worked in nonprofits. That's mostly my background. Building houses for those in need, working with children at risk youth, working with seniors. So I've taken all that experience, leadership skills, and pretty much I realized there's just always been a common thread throughout my employment, my background. And that's really helping the leader to realize that they're more than just their title and their position, and helping the teams also. So pretty much 2017, I embarked my own journey with Timeless Worth Coaching and Consulting. And I've just been working with executives and also some organization, helping them with their communication skills in the workplace, and just want to continue that conversation of diversity. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a nutshell. So thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you for your service. It sounds like you've been helping so many different people from leadership executives to building houses. And you said, and recovery folks. That's really, really powerful to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you said you've been working with these executives. So let me start with the obvious question. Why do leaders sometimes lack self-awareness?
Well, really good question. First, let's define the term and philosophy of leadership, right? Leadership is influence. And the only thing that a title can buy is just a little time either to increase your level of influence with others or undermine it. So pretty much what I've come to realize is that leadership is not something that you can mandate of others, right? You can't force others to follow you. And so in order to maximize the privilege of being a leader, assuming that we all want to have a positive and influential impact, you can't get caught up simply in the doing and neglect the being. And many leaders lack self-awareness because they are identifying themselves from a conceptual view, and they focus heavily simply on metrics and systems and overanalyzing data, things of that nature. And what happens is that the majority of their time and energy isn't focused on who they want to become. They're not aware of how they're leading, others, how they're leading their team, things of that nature. And so ultimately what you have is a lack of introspection. And from that point on, it sets the foundation for a lack of self-awareness.
That's so interesting to think about. Like, how do I look at myself in form of metrics, like my success rate with, outcome and jobs, or, performance levels and feedback and all that stuff. Those are all metric-based systems, which I think we're really used to now with the word that we're all familiar with is the algorithm. There's the algorithm that was sorting all of us, and we're all kind of in the algorithm, whatever the algorithm is. So how can we break out of the algorithm a little bit, out of the metrics? And what is it that you impart with folks and help folks with, how and where that these leaders can gain self-awareness? Is it like a one-on-one thing? Do you work on groups? And what does that actually look like when you're working with these folks?
There's a variety of methods, but first thing first is to acknowledge that self-awareness is important to their success. And we're not just talking about business, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about success, we're just talking about business. And I think that perspective in itself limits our ability and how much we could thrive and help others as well. So one, realizing that self-awareness is important. This is not just business talk. It's it's at home, it's in the relationship, it's in the community, right? It encompasses all of that. And the next is to pretty much humble yourself. Okay. Don't be afraid to request feedback, as you made mention earlier. Like, yes, all those things are important, the metrics, when we're working on systems, but getting feedback from others, your team, the people that you serve, that allowing them to assess your character and your leadership style, right? That's important. And next, of course, not a shameful plug here, but invest in a personal coach and a therapist. I love therapy, you know what I mean? And I also have my business coaches as well. And so when you prioritize your growth, you prove to yourself that you matter. And that's why the emphasis is self-awareness. How much are we aware of what we need, And the next is what I like to call being active participant, in cultivating the results that you want. Yes, you're going to get help. Yes, you're going to get insight. You're going to get feedback. And all these things are good. But nonetheless, you need to make sure that you're applying what you're reading, because too many times what we do with these help books, we take all the knowledge and we put it on a shelf, but we're not really applying it in our everyday lives. So I always say, the minute you read something and you feel that you've gotten an insight from it, implement it right away, and that's one of the ways that you continue to gain self-awareness, because we're all learning ourselves, and we will be until the day we die. That's just life.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, right. Hope that's the assumption that I make as a coach. Who doesn't want this? But I'm learning, not everyone.
Yeah, well, so much great stuff in there. I mean, yeah, absolutely. The self-care is vital, and I'm also a big proponent of therapy and all that sort of outside help that you can get. Those resources has helped me through a lot of stuff. And it, like you said, it infuses through, it's not just career. It's like, how are you at home? How are you with the barista at the coffee shop? Like, how are we in all of these moments? Is there a self-awareness, and are we bringing it to the table in, ideally everything we do? Of course, I get lost in my own thoughts and thinking. And
for sure. It's human nature.
Human nature, right? But then we can bring it back. And I love, I want to highlight what you said about you get an insight and implement it. That is like into action and also practice, right? Because you're like, oh, let's conceptually, I understand that, but what does that feel like for me to do that? And then, maybe there's some room for improvement if I try it a little more like this, and it's a little better, and and then we're on the journey, right?
Yeah. No, seriously, I love your point. That's what it's all about. And we have to implement it, because if we're not, then it just gets stored up here, and it's of no service to anyone. So
it gets stored up here, and then I go on Instagram, and then it's deleted.
Exactly,
and
right?
A puppy video is there instead. And I love puppy videos, but
Yes. But sometimes we just gotta sit. We just gotta sit, let it resonate a little bit before we get distracted with the other thing, which is easy to get distracted. So
it's so easy to do. So what so you talked a little bit earlier too, you mentioned like possessing different like energies, right? So like what do you mean by that? Like I have a assumption of like, like today I'm like feeling like upbeat and optimistic and like conversational. Is like, is that an energy? And what are these energies that maybe, if we're doing that self-awareness inventory for leaders, what are these energies that they can acknowledge and then use, or maybe veer away from for certain situations?
No, great question. So when I had made mention about leaders needing to be aware of their energy, I'll give you a little background where it came from. So years ago, after I had graduated college, I read a book by Dr. Richard Dobbins titled Feelings, Friends or Foe. And in this book, way before energy became a buzzword, he pretty much described how we all walk with a presence, right? Wherever we go, we all carry a certain tone with us. And so I became more alert, aware of my presence and my energy that I was bringing. And I became more mindful, what type of energy that I want to be associated with, right? Like you said, whether coffee shop, no matter where you're at, like, am I consistent with who I am, right? Even now, as I'm speaking to you, am I the same Esther that as soon as I, get done with this and I head back to the office, like, am I going to be the same person, you know? And so I became more mindful of that, wanting to be consistent. And I also started observing other leaders around me as well before I took the jump. And so what I found was that everyone, it is true what Richard Dobson said, everyone possesses the energy. For example, some people walk with an energy of being calm. When they walk in a room, no matter how crazy things may have felt, they bring a sense of calmness into the room, right? Some people bring fear and an anxious spirit with them. When they come into a room, such as a leader, like your team feels scatterbrained, they're unsure of what they're doing. Some people bring that confidence and order. I like to say confidence and order, where it's like, yes, your team has the power to be themselves and make mistakes, you know, understanding they're going to learn from it. And some people just walk around, you know, like just rigid, ready to punish, you know, a mistake. So again, everyone walks around with the present. And I think one of the ways that we can do that, one, assess ourselves, and ask yourself, what is the dominant emotion that you tend to have every single day? Yes, it fluctuates, but I like when I learned this about emotions, meaning energy and motion, right? And so we're constantly having a shift depending on what happens throughout the day. We might wake up in the morning feeling optimistic and our tire get busted and we get distracted with that, right? But nonetheless, each and every one of us, again, we have a dominant emotion that pretty much kind of highlights our character and allows us to be consistent. And once we find that out, now we need to find out, how effective is this emotion for my team? You know, is it helping my team, or what do I need to modify? Because emotions can be modified. You know, I can acknowledge that my day is not going well, but I don't have to speak and say I'm going to have a bad day. You know, so things like that. So yeah, just being very practical, assessing and getting to know yourself.
I love that. That's the first time I've heard like energy motion. So I am taking that. I'm going to put that in my pocket. I'm going to
take it, Hunter, take it.
And I love too, you know, it's, you know, we've heard the old adage, you know, like, this is maybe a botched version of, you know, leave your feelings at the door, right? And it's not exactly that, right? But there is like, oh, well, how about taking stock? So maybe I got some bad news this morning, before starting work that has nothing to do with work, you know, a personal issue, right? And that's valid, right? And really like acknowledging that and like, oh, this is hard and maybe I'm upset right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we can, like you said, be mindful of that and like give ourselves the space to feel our feelings, you know?
Yeah.
But it's a balance, right? To not then like accidentally throw that feeling at somebody.
Yes. And I always tell my clients and anyone that I speak to, like, yo, dignify yourself, you know, like, whatever you feel, I take into consideration. I validate all my feelings. However, what I don't do is allow my feelings to control and dictate how I'm going to behave.
Right.
But I never deny myself of anything that I feel, because one, I'm human. It is what it is, you know? Yeah. So I can be upset about a particular situation or disappointed, whatever, but it doesn't mean that throughout the day that, you know, is going to affect how I encounter others, how I resolve issues. No, acknowledging a feeling and identifying yourself as that feeling, they're two different things.
Absolutely. I've heard some people refer to it as, you know, if we're in the vehicle, you know, have my feelings in the passenger seat. I'm driving, but I can be sitting alongside you. And I'm like, okay, there you are, anger.
Yeah, I like that. I'm taking that too, Hunter. I'm taking
it up.
I'm taking it. Oh, you a passenger. Okay, I'm gonna acknowledge you, but you sitting over there. I love it.
As we are in emotion in this feeling.
I love it. I'm taking it. I'm taking it. So thank you for that gem.
Oh, yes. Please do. Someone handed it to me, so I offered freely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some other ways that, or how would you say, once, you know, you're starting to work with clients that are leaders, you're working with in their, they have a team under them. And so when we're starting to do this, what are some of the results you have seen in their abilities to manage people better? And what does the management of others by a leader with like a lack of self-awareness look like? So it's like, let's say there's the ones that perhaps you could speak to, like you've seen the results with folks you've worked with. And then also maybe you can be like, oh, well, they're just not doing the things that they could be doing?
Yeah. So I love this question. And to do it justice, I'm going to share a brief story here. Okay. And it's an example because as a coach, it's like, what's been relevant, what's been true in your life that you can impart to others. Right. So I remember one time, when I was working at a place, there was a staff member. I was new. And as soon as I come in, clients and other, staff would just be like, hey, this person has this attitude, et cetera, and all that kind of stuff. So before I even had a chance to know the person for myself, I was already getting complaints. And so I wanted to be mindful to not dismiss everything as true, but nonetheless, in observing, I wanted to see how was I going to be able to work with the staff of mine. And so being aware of my own personal leadership style and my standards for communication, I would just address things on a one-on-one basis with them, right? In meetings. And there were times even in meetings where I just had to give them the signal of this, not now, we're not going to have that attitude right now. Like, let's focus on the agenda, things of that nature. And so over time, what I started noticing, the more they picked up on my leadership style, over time, when there was an issue, they would come to my office and just debrief it real quick and say, hey, Esther, what's the best way do you think I should go about it? Things of that nature. And so the time had come and I was employed there for a brief moment and I had to go on vacation for 2 weeks. But because of their expertise, they understood the operation, I had to hand the baton over to this person. And so I spoke to them. I told them my standards. We went all over it and they assured me like, hey, everything's going to be okay. I got you. Okay. So pretty much, but I also let them know that, hey, if you need me, something urgent come up while I'm on vacation, give me a call. So I wanted to create the boundaries, but I also wanted to show that, hey, I was available if you really need help with something you can't solve for yourself. So with that being said, I go on vacation for 2 weeks. I don't get any call whatsoever. Right. And I try not to think too much about it, just enjoying my times up in the mountain of Tennessee with my family. And so I come back and no one's coming to my door complaining about this individual whatsoever. And we have staff meetings and the other team is actually praising this member, saying, hey, they did so good in your absence, their leadership, they really showed up. And she was so proud of herself. She was like, Esther, I did good. I represented you well, you had no complaints about me. So I share that story. And the goal of a leader is not to necessarily make your team become a clone of you, because that's the meaning. Everyone is different. Our personalities were wired differently, but it is about teaching your team in your absence how to uphold those same values and principles that you guys share together as a team. And one must be respect, showing respect for everyone, no matter their level of leadership, where they're at in the organization. And next, understanding that as leaders, your job is to diffuse drama and conflict in the workplace, not to escalate it, So that was an example of when you're self-aware as a leader, now you know how to guide others in their shortcomings as well. And I've seen, examples, as you asked earlier, the lack of self-awareness of a leadership, it causes distrust. Sorry, my Invisaligner tongue tie-in. It causes distrust in leadership. It brings a toxic workplace culture, where people don't really feel welcome to give their inputs, their feedback. It causes dissension among teammates because sometimes the leader, due to their lack of self-awareness, could be showing favoritism or they're demeaning others based on their communication style. And the other thing is that they could also be setting unrealistic goals for their teams, which causes people to underperform, right? So these are all the back-end consequences of what can happen when a leader lacks self-awareness.
And I love that success story where you were able to go enjoy the time, and that they also had this moment for themselves where they celebrate that.
And that's what you want for your team. You don't want them to feel like, they're so dependent on you that if you're not around, they can't function properly. No, you want to empower them so that they could be sufficient and move efficiently, even in your absence, because that's really the true, I would say, the true spark of a leader. How well do your team and your followers maneuver in your absence?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a few minutes left. This is such a great conversation, and I want to encourage our listeners, if you have any questions, now is the time. Seize the moment. Get in this emotion, get in the driver's seat with us here.
Yes.
Please feel free to throw us some questions. We'd love to hear from you. Some other things you mentioned here that I would love to highlight, and there's beautiful stories and examples. You talked about two words that were like neon signs for me that came up were boundaries and respect. It was like two sides of the moon phase, right?
Yeah.
And so, what are other ways that leaders can show respect to people no matter where they are in their level or in their journey? Because sometimes, you've talked about, or we've heard, that you gotta I don't know, prove yourself, and people that you like you were saying earlier, am I putting on this thing, or am I being the same? Am I consistent? So maybe if we could talk about it from two different angles, how can leaders, on a very practical way, if they're listening right now, how can they show a sign of respect and safety for their employees and their teams? And how can the teams, maybe those folks that are oh, I feel like I'm always doing X when I really want to do Y, can you talk about that relationship there a little bit for us?
You opening a can of worms here, Hunter. We're going to try to do this justice. You really are. Can we do another session? But no.
I hope so. Yes, please. Power to Fly. You heard it now. We want another one.
But on the real, it goes back to self-confidence, right? Do you know who you are? Because when you know who you are, you don't have to put on a facade for anything, nor do you have to try to intimidate anybody with your leadership and position. I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table. But even in that, though, I also know that I'm limited. I have blind spots, and I'm going to need others as well. So therefore, it becomes easy to respect others and gain their feedback because I know that I don't know it all, right? And so confidence doesn't mean that you walk around thinking you're macho, No, it just shows hey, you're aware of yourself. You show respect for yourself. And more importantly, you show that same respect for other people. And that respect is shown by allowing people to give their feedback to you freely without getting defensive about it as well, And the next question, there was another question you asked.
For the folks that are maybe on the team and they're interacting with the leaders. I think it's transferable to what you're saying.
Yes, it really is.
Right? Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And even, I've been a team member before. Speak up. Now, speaking up can get you in trouble depending on the personality of the leader, but always do it from a place of respect, right? Not to disrespect their position or belittle them in any way, but because you're part of the team and you all are supposed to share a common vision and value, if there's a conflict and something that needs to be addressed, you address it on that behalf. It's not personal. On behalf of the shared values, here's what I see, and I think this needs to be addressed, etc. Yeah.
I love that. That made me just think of, so I just did a silent meditation retreat for a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
It was very helpful.
I bet.
It was always fun, but it was helpful.
Yeah.
And there were these 3 questions I think you might enjoy that feel very related to what we're talking about. Was we can ask ourselves when you're talking about maintaining, or when we're taking these inventories and getting to know ourselves, there's these 3 questions one of the teachers brought up, which is, what's happening? So let's say I'm in a work meeting, right? Or I'm meditating or whatever it is. What's my relationship to it right now? Am I hesitated? Am I welcoming? Am I defensive? Am I cocky? What's happening? And then if you're in the moment, the question can be, if it's present, it can be, let's see how it changes. Or if you're looking back on your day, how did it change? Right. Yeah. So, I feel like it made me think, I was like, oh, I think Esther might dig this.
No, absolutely. And everything that you just said, honestly, it shows a respect for self. It shows a respect for time. Yes. And it's reflection. And honestly, it's crazy the amount of people who don't carve out the time to practice self-reflection, and without that, you can't have self-awareness, So really, if people just learn to respect their time and understand how valuable they are to this earth, man, and where they're at, you matter so much, your time matters, give yourself the respect and growing and getting to know yourself, So thank you for sharing that. That sounds like it was an amazing retreat.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. I highly recommend that to any type of self-reflection that, Esther is talking about too, whatever that is for you, if it's a walk, if it's a retreat, if it's reaching out to a mentor or coach, there are so many tools available to us, right?
Absolutely.
So we have just a couple minutes left, and we got some great questions coming in from the audience here. And we had a question that is, who do you look up to for inspiration or mentorship? So I think that's directed to you.
Oh my, I have many. Okay. There's Dr. Phil Messier. He's a leadership coach and a minister as well. And John Maxwell, I did my certification through the John Maxwell team, so I love his style of leadership. There's another leadership coach out there, Dr. Kelvin McCree. There's so many people, and these names, they're known internationally. You know, they might not be on the biggest of big stages, but nonetheless, their impact is so influential. So while I named those three, and I would encourage you to go and read their books, but also look around you. Who's that leader in the workplace, right? Sometimes it's a team member who has great leadership skills that we can learn from. So we don't always have to look outside, but just look in us. Who has that character that you would like to cultivate in your own life, and get to know them and talk to them and ask them how they became that person. And so let's grow together, literally, as a community, and, you know, inward focus, and not just always seeking, you know, people on big stages, things of that nature.
Yeah, I love that, because there's ones that we can turn to, and thank you for, you know, naming some of those. I was like writing the names down, Googling as you were talking in the background. But also, I love that we can like find the ones in our life, right, that stand out to us. On the flip side, here's a spicy question to maybe end with. What is the most dangerous trait in a leader's career? Interesting.
Oh my goodness. That is such a good question.
Yeah.
I would say just getting to this place of being stagnant, you know, to the point where you have no vision on how you want to move forward. You're not doing any introspection whatsoever. You're not getting feedback from anybody. You're there. You're just existing, you know, and that's such a dangerous place to be, because we're called to be beings. There's so much more to us. And so being stagnant is a very dangerous place.
Oh, yeah.
Who's out there?
Yeah. Sorry, I think my internet is a little choppy right now.
Yeah, I wasn't too sure if it's mine or, because I have full bars, but I hope I answered the question nonetheless, though.
Yes, you did. You absolutely did. Stagnation is what I was hearing too, like being stagnant and where you are. And so, you know, Esther, thank you so much for making the time today. And, you know, I encourage you all listening to keep that emotion moving, and you can reach out to Esther to help you do that. Esther, how can people stay connected with you? Where can they find you?
Well, you could definitely find me on Facebook, Instagram, Esther Lully, as my name is spelled. And you can also follow me on my website, timelessworth.com. Subscribe to my email so you can receive growth tips. And I'll be coming out with some online courses, self-coaching for leaders. So yes, so stay updated with me. But follow me, Facebook, Instagram, Esther Lully.
Awesome. Esther Lully, thank you so much for making the time. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Indeed, Hunter, I love your vibe. You have a great day, and bye to all the listeners.
Thanks. Take care now.
All right, bye.